Hey everyone, welcome to Censored to Celebrated. My name is Melita Noël Cantú. Hopefully you can hear me out there loud and clear. I'm kind of in a rainbow mode today. You may notice I've got my shades on. So we'll be talking a little bit more about what that's all about. I'm very, very excited to have my fellow board member and the co-founder of the Human Empathy Project, Dr. Gena Minnix, here with us today. And here's Gena. Hey, Gena. Great to see you.
Hi. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, Gena is coming to us from the background of being a professor. She just recently finished her Ph.D. and she's going to tell us a little bit more about this whole path that she's taken, as well as being a therapist. And you'll see she has a string of degrees after her name, and she can tell us a little bit more about those because they're a little bit of gobbledygook alphabet soup to me, a different kind of alphabet soup. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about those. And she's also, as I said, the co-founder of the Human Empathy Project, which is here in Austin, Texas, and started back in 2012. And she's going to have a special announcement for us today about that. So welcome, Gena. And why don't we go ahead and start with talking about the alphabet soup, as I just was, and in academia there are lots of alphabet soups, as in, you know, all the different degree titles. But then tell us a little bit in terms of your work with diverse sexuality and gender. What is your preferred version of the alphabet soup? Is it LGBT? Is it LGBTQ plus? Is it DSG? Yeah, what makes the most sense for the folks you are working with?
So when I started my doctoral work, I was looking at the intersection between faith and LGBT affirmation. And so faith being our beliefs about God and what God desires in God's relationship with us and how we live out our faith. And then LGBT being lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, which I found to be a term that showed up in the mental health literature. And I think that's because it is a term that's used in the US Census to collect data on the diversity in America. And so we have a lot of demographics and statistics regarding folks who identify with LGBT or part of the LGBT community. So it made it a little bit easier for me to do research that builds upon that foundation in the literature, with a lot of awareness that there are a vast group of people who that does not resonate with them and experience their gender and their experiences to be expanding beyond LGBT, and so you know, you and I, Melita, have talked some about this new term DSG, diverse sexuality and gender, that is seeming to be trending and resonating with more folks because it is more inclusive, and all of us fall somewhere on that spectrum that DSG would envelop. And so in a lot of ways, that term makes a lot of sense to me because it is it's inclusive. It's harder to track statistics than in demographics on folks who identify with particular communities. And then you and I have talked some too about I don't know if this is an okay tangent to bring in, but about that it's just really hard to find a term that resonates with everyone. And so you
Absolutely.
know, in faith communities, where, you know, a lot of us in faith communities consider sexuality and physical intimacy to be really sacred, and you know, people outside of faith communities do too, and so sometimes when we talk and write about sex, about sexuality, and if folks who are reading what we're writing don't know where we're coming from and how we're treating that aspect of our lives, you know, I have a friend of mine who is a pastor who said recently, he was talking about this word sanctified, which is a word that shows up in my faith tradition quite a bit. And he was explaining that that word means taking something and using it for the sacred purpose for which it was originally intended, and kind of giving it its rightful place in our lives. And that idea of talking about sex and physical intimacy as something sacred, something that can be holy, and that when we talk about it, we should take our shoes off a little bit. And so that's to say that when we use a term like DSG, diverse sexuality and gender, may really resonate with a lot of people. And then if some folks, and like I'm thinking about some folks in our faith communities that are not accustomed to having things come across their email or social media with the word sexuality in it or sex in it, and they don't know how we're carrying that term or what we mean by it, then it could be a barrier to engagement and connection for some of those folks. And so that's just to say that's a long way of answering your original question, or not answering it, which is to say I think it's really hard to find a single term that resonates with everybody. So for myself, you just use whatever term makes sense for you, and I'll track you. I'll track you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and, it's interesting because that comes up a lot, Gena, of it really makes sense to be sensitive to the population that you're talking with. And if in academia, it's easier to do your research with the LGBT because that's kind of what's been used more longitudinally, then that makes a lot of sense. So it'll be interesting to see where and if DSG takes off. I mean, it certainly is shorter to use only 3 letters, but who knows? So tell me a little bit, speaking of, I know you just got your Ph.D. Congratulations. So tell me a little bit about how you've gotten here to your work as a therapist, your academic work, and also to founding the Human Empathy Project. What was that process like for you?
So I mentioned that I'm a person of faith, and that I identify with the Christian traditions, and the word evangelical has been a word that for me, the evangelical in the Greek means sharing good news. And so that the evangelical Christian community shares some common values around scripture, being seen as the word of God, and having an experience, some people call it like a born again experience, where they really feel God coming into their life. And I definitely have experienced that, and feel like my image of God is very personal, and in the sense of having a real relationship with this entity that I consider, that I experience as God, and then sharing the hope and love that I receive from that relationship with others. And so that really, that's good news. And so I identify with that word evangelical, which means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but that's what it means for me. And so I share that to say that everything that has come from my in this part of my story is with that context of who I am and my faith. And so in college, I was baptized Southern Baptist, and I think it was in college that the first few experiences that I had with friends who shared with me about being attracted to people of the same gender, falling in love with people of the same gender, and in our faith communities, there was a real valuing around reading ancient scriptures, the Old Testament and New Testament of the Christian Bible, and trying to discern how to live that out in our lives. And that's still very much an important part of my faith. And so there are these verses in the Old Testament, and then there's a couple in the Old Testament, and then there's one in this book of Romans, and then where it's talking about women exchanging natural relations for unnatural, and men exchanging natural relations for unnatural. And then there's this one word that shows up in Corinthians and it shows up in Timothy. And it has traditionally, you know, the Bible was originally written in Hebrew and Greek. And so ancient Hebrew and Greek, ancient Greek, Koine Greek is a language that's no longer spoken today. So in order to figure out how to translate those words, we go back to other texts that were written at the same time and try to figure out what they were meaning by that word. And there's this one word that's fairly obscure that in the English translations of the New Testament continued to be translated as homosexuality. And it shows up in Corinthians and it shows up in Timothy. And so based on those readings, so now we have a lot more information and context for what that word, very likely it meant pedophilia, as opposed to same gender loving relationships like we know them today to be like in same-sex marriage. So that type of relationship was not talked about in the scripture that we know of. And so most likely it was referring to pedophilia and sexual abuse, which we all can agree is outside of a context of love, and would make perfect sense for there to be cautionary scriptures about that. So, but anyway, so we didn't have that information in the faith community where I was growing and learning and experiencing God for the first time. And so when some of our Christian friends would share that they were feeling attracted to people of the same gender or falling in love with people of the same gender, there's this idea, there's this real sense that that God has laid out for us wisdom, that if we follow it, that we will be in good relationship with God and with others. And if we go outside of that wisdom, that there may be suffering and heartache. And so there's this real genuine compassion and a desire to help one another to stay in that stream of wisdom. And so you take that very sincere desire to be helpful and good friends for one another, and then these scriptures that seem to suggest that that same gender attraction would lead to suffering and heartache, and then there's this lots and lots of desires to try to help folks resist that and change it and not act on that. And so now what I know much more about the impact of those types of interactions for folks as well, meaning as they may be, it just places people all the people in those interactions are in tremendous binds, just relational binds and faith binds and personal binds. And it just leads to a lot of stuckness, and it leads to the very suffering and heartache that we are wanting to prevent. So that's a little bit of background that didn't quite get to the work that I've been doing more recently, but that's some of where I came from.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And we had a great comment from something that I didn't know because I'm not a biblical scholar in any way, shape, or form. Sally Ember mentioned that the Bible was originally written in Aramaic and Greek. Is that? I didn't know that.
So the Hebrews around the time of Jesus spoke Aramaic, which was like a dialect of Hebrew, but the Old Testament, like, especially those first 5 books that we consider, the Pentateuch, was written in Hebrew.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is so interesting to me. This kind of intersection around faith and diverse sexuality and gender, how you've been looking at it, or LGBT identity, is so interesting. So I know you have a special announcement for us today. And given, you talked a little bit about your background and how you got into this work. As you know, I come from a Unitarian Universalist background, and Episcopalian is kind of more my family background up north. So this has been very new to me to be in Texas and learning more about the evangelical approach and the challenges there, as well as some of the celebrations. So as the co-founder of the Human Empathy Project, tell me about what you're working on right now, and what we as a board and as a community are moving forward with as we move into summer 2015.
Yeah, well, and so so the Human Empathy Project was birthed out of an experience that I had many, many years after these college days that I was describing to you, where I've still been very connected and involved in faith communities, and then also had trained as a therapist and as a professional counselor and a marriage and family therapist. And so fast forward many years and many different experiences, I had heard, you know, numerous stories of folks coming out to themselves, coming out to their communities, coming out to their Christian families, and was very aware of the heartache and relational disconnection that often happens in Christian families and communities for exactly the reasons why I just explained. But there's one particular day that was transformative for me, and I can't even explain why this particular day, this particular story that I heard of a brave woman sharing her story of coming out to her Christian family, and the response that she received back from them that was so hurtful to her, and that they felt so hurt at her disclosure. And it brought up all those binds that I was just talking about. And I just was broken. And I, in that moment, felt so much empathy for the woman and empathy for her parents. And and I saw that all those binds that we get in around this, I saw them just so clearly for the first time. And I envisioned at that moment, the vision for the Human Empathy Project was born, and it was almost like I saw it. And I know that sounds weird, and I hardly ever that's not a common experience for me, but I just felt like I wanted to do anything I could to understand this, the conflict that folks are feeling about when they perceive a conflict between their faith or their Christian beliefs and LGBT affirmation, understand that conflict as well as possible, and then offer spaces where folks can experience mutual empathy around their experiences and those binds, and support one another relationally to do whatever reconciliation processes we feel inclined to do about that. For a long time, I didn't feel inclined to do any reconciliation process because it wasn't a personal issue for me, or I wasn't letting it touch me personally. But then there came a point where I couldn't not let it touch me, and so
yeah, it sounds like you had a real aha. You had a real aha moment of clarity. It sounds like, yeah.
Yes.
And and that was back in 2012. Is that what you're saying?
That was just prior to 2012, and nice. And I think that's what empathy does. So that was the best word that I could reach for to explain what I felt like happened internally, and also then in my relationships. It just started changing my relationships with others. I started listening with new ears, and seeing people more clearly and fully for who they are and what their experiences have been. And then as a byproduct, I felt like I understood an aspect of God that I'd not understood before. So if you can just imagine how unsettling some of that was for me. So what we did with the Empathy Project was I had met a few other folks who were very eager for spaces to have conversations around this intersection of faith, gender, and sexual diversity, and maybe did not find it available in their faith communities, or folks who identified LGBT or somewhere along, diverse gender and sexuality spectrum, and were not finding places to talk about faith and their experiences with faith communities. And so we started having dinners and discussions, and we started on a monthly basis and inviting folks wherever they were on any of those spectrums of any of those communities who wanted to just have a space carved out intentionally to share our stories and experience and exchange mutual empathy, and learn how to best express empathy in a way that, empathy just transforms us and our relationships. It's a way of, you know, when we feel something strongly, it goes to the mid part of our brain, that where the amygdala lives, and it becomes really consumed with emotion, and our bodies respond to that emotion. But where empathy lives, and also like creativity and intentionality, all that's up here in our frontal lobe. And so it's helping the amygdala speak to the frontal lobe and back and forth, so that we can be skillful in our relationships with each other, and we all mutually grow because of that. So anyway, that's one of the learning more and more about empathy and what it is. We didn't even have a word for it around 100 years ago. So empathy is a relatively new word and a relatively new awareness that we're having of what is happening in our brains internally, and then what's happening relationally between us when we exchange empathy with one another. So that's a little bit about the Empathy Project. You asked what new thing we're doing.
Yes, I want to hear you say it. It's so exciting to be announcing it today.
Well, so for the last 2 to 3 years, we were hosting these monthly dinners and discussions, and we came up with a discussion guide that was sort of like an introduction to empathy training. And we were developing resources that we put up on our website, and consulting with faith communities who wanted some wisdom and guidance in how to host these conversations in their faith communities. And then we entered into a season of discernment this past year, which you were a part of, and where we pulled back and asked the question, what are the real needs now that we've identified in our communities, in our discussions, and the hundreds of folks now who have participated in Human Empathy Project events and shared with us what's helpful for them. And what we discerned was that one of the things that we discerned is that one of our best gifts as an organization, the Empathy Project is a 501c 501c3 nonprofit, and one of the things we discerned that we can best offer support for the interpersonal growth that people may be engaging in. So there are 3 levels of social change. People who look at social change movements talk about the personal level, the interpersonal level, and then the political level. And what we discerned is that our strengths and gifts lie in the interpersonal level as opposed to the personal or the political. And so interpersonally, what we have to offer folks is ourselves. It's just ourselves and our availability for relationship and for connection and for empathy, and which is to say, empathy thrives when there's no other agenda other than just truly getting to know one another, and growth and mutual learning just flows naturally from that process. And so the new thing, not answering your question, but answering a whole lot of other things. But the new project that's emerged from that discernment was that it may be helpful for folks to have an outward symbol of their availability for connection and empathic connection, particularly around these matters of faith, gender, and sexual diversity. And an outward symbol that would convey to you, if I saw you out in public or in your faith community or at an event, that would convey to you that I have received some training from the Human Empathy Project and am available to have conversation, connect, provide you with empathy, and around these particular matters of faith, the intersection of faith, gender, and sexual diversity. So that's what we are experimenting with, and designed a pin that I believe you may be wearing on your celebration.
Yes, I will. I will be, and I want to give I also have these really cool little cards. I just want to show everybody that talks that. Because we're also going to be offering some empathy training, and online and in person. And so not only will people have a cool symbol that they can wear, but they'll be getting some training too. And do you want to talk a little bit about why we're doing that?
Sure, about the training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we've learned from 3 years of practice now is that empathy is both so basic and human, and also very difficult to necessarily know how to express it. Again, when we feel things strongly, like I said, it's coming from a different part of our brain, and then our ability to put ourselves in somebody else's position and imagine what their experience has been like and feel what they might feel, that comes from a different part of the brain, and so requires some practice and some learning. And so that's what we have pulled together, some just basics, training around that's very easy to practice, and we'll offer that in person as well as online, so folks can access that from their homes. And then if they are interested in being part of those of us who are wanting to offer that empathy out in our communities, in our faith communities, one
and in our everyday lives, right?
And in our everyday lives, one example that came from some of our members was of the queer or LGBT person who may be attending their faith community and not know who is available to have empathic conversations around what they're experiencing around their gender and sexuality. And so this idea that maybe they could reach out to the Empathy Project and find folks who were willing to accompany them to their faith communities, just for that relational support, and then the ability to have something visible to identify our availability for that. And so anyway, there's lots of ways that people have gotten very excited, folks have gotten very excited about different ways that this will help expand our ability to connect with those who are wanting that type of relational connection around these difficult, these can be difficult issues to reconcile. And so that's what I did my entire dissertation on, was how hard it is for folks to reconcile the matters of faith, gender, and sexual diversity. But people do, and that's what I interviewed folks who had successfully reconciled those in their lives. And so that's what we're hoping with this project, to let more people know that it's available.
Right. Well, and I know that we're almost to, we only have a couple more minutes. So do you have a couple minutes you can stay over? I know I want to honor everyone's time, but I also want to make sure that we get to all the two more really fun questions. And I just wanted to make sure to emphasize that we are in the process of announcing all of this on the Human Empathy Project website. I will be going on the celebration tour on starting this Saturday, June 13th, and I will be wearing the symbol. It has yet to be revealed, but it will be on the website and on social media and to our email list for the Human Empathy Project. So you can watch out for that. And yeah, so I'll be getting some really great feedback, and we're still looking for a great name about what it means, what you call yourself when you're wearing this symbol. Do you want to talk, just mention the two of the ideas we have right now?
Oh, yes, you can help me remember. I think we were playing around with the term empathy bearer, as someone who would go out and bear empathy, extending it, and also empathy fosterers, because that's how we express our vision for our project, as a foster mutually empathic connection with faith, gender, and sexual diversity communities. So empathy fosterers, but we're very open to feedback and folks who want to message us with ideas.
Okay, yeah, and I just put that up on the comment so that people can make their suggestions or vote for the ones they like the best. So, well, good. And I also wanted to show a couple of, just to show the power of symbols. As you can probably all see behind me, I've got some rainbow action going on here with my artwork and all the books. I also have some bumper stickers that I'll be have on my car and sharing during the tour, so that if that's something that you're interested in getting, you can let me know, and I'm happy to send those out to folks. But just the power of something like the rainbow. You know, you see the rainbow and we think about LGBT pride, you know, and this bracelet actually says pride on it. I just got them pre-fabbed and pre-ordered. Same thing with these glasses. These say pride on the side of them, you know, so this is clearly, you can see how the marketing of the rainbow has really been powerful for the LGBT community. And we wanted to find a similar symbol that was powerful in a similar way, but really in terms of empathy and faith and the path that one takes in their faith and around challenges, you know, especially around things like diverse sexuality and gender, which can so often be challenging, as you've spoken to. So it's really neat. I wanted to show two other really cool things, Gena, and then I'm going to ask you the next question. But this is the book I'll be featuring today on my Book a Day blog, and these are the book plates that will be going in. If I can get it the right way. These are the books that I'll be donating to the libraries, and these are the book plates that'll be going to the libraries in honor. It says, "This book is gifted in celebration of." And all of these books have been gifted by people in our community, and I'm so thrilled to be able to do this. And we have bookmarks too. So all this cool stuff is happening in terms of my celebration tour, and I can't wait to be wearing our symbol. So what I wanted to ask you, yay, Gena, what I wanted to ask you is, what's a time that you have felt that you've moved from feeling censored to celebrated? Because that is such a big theme for me. And maybe it involves a book that's changed or saved your life, or maybe it's just a situation where you've really noticed that censorship to celebration.
Yeah. I think my what comes to mind when I hear you talking about moving from censored to celebrated is ways that I've censored myself when I felt so broken over the pain and heartache that folks have experienced around these binds that I couldn't talk about it. I felt it too deeply in my body, and I didn't have words to express what I was exploring and the questions I was exploring around it. And so I would censor myself for lack of trusting myself to even know where to begin. And that was a process of a few years. And I feel like going through my PhD program and really diving into the research and then doing research myself on folks who have reconciled a perceived conflict between faith and LGBT affirmation. What it did is it brought me into that frontal lobe of my brain where I could find language to name some of those components of that dilemma and that experience, and then language to express and receive mutual empathy with folks wherever they are. And so that's really something that in the Human Empathy Project is, you and all of us on the board and who've participated have this common value around wanting to practice empathy with wherever someone is on that around those matters.
Absolutely.
What makes empathy possible is no agenda other than us knowing each other empathetically, and then we just learn and grow from that. And so that's to say, you asked about books. There are two books.
Well, I was just
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, what I love about the story of how you moved from censorship to celebration sounds like it was around education for you. Which is, and of course, leading right into the next question is, like, books are a big part of that. And I think a lot of people have that experience when they find something that that kind of gives them a click or an aha moment, some educational, teachable moment, is I think it's very powerful. And I like how you really crystallize that for us.
Thanks. Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'll mention a couple of books because we've gotten feedback from so many folks, and especially folks in the evangelical Christian communities who have really found these two books to be informative. So one is Torn by Justin Lee. And Justin Lee also hosts a website, the Gay Christian Network, and has a lot of resources on his website as well. And then the second book is a newer one, and it's called A Letter to My Congregation, and it's by a pastor named Ken Wilson, and he's writing to the folks in his faith community. So it's very a personal letter from him detailing his process of reconciling his faith with LGBT affirmation. And so a lot of folks in my circles have found that book very informative. And then I'll mention that on the Human Empathy Project webpage, we have resources for pastors and ministers and faith community leaders. And then I also have a blog, Empathy and Theology, that is just a library for resources on empathy and theology for pastors, ministers, and faith community leaders. And so that's a starting place of some places to look for resources.
Where can we find your blog? I didn't know about that. That's great.
It's on my Google Plus page. There are some links to it.
Great.
And,
okay.
And I invite people to also suggest resources that would be helpful for faith community leaders that are looking for ways of infusing their theology with empathy. And so I'm hoping it'll be a nice place for people to go and share resources with each other.
Fantastic. Well, Gena, this has been so wonderful to talk with you and to get a chance to do this on From Censored to Celebrated and share some announcements. As you know, I'm going on the celebration tour in 2 days, so it's been a little bit of a madhouse, kind of like keep balancing my health and my family life with getting ready for this trip. But I'm very excited to be doing it. I'm very excited you and I got to really launch this next steps for the Human Empathy Project here together today. And I wanted to just thank everybody out there who's been watching us and interacting with us and asking questions and listening so intently and with empathy as Gena and I do this have this conversation today. So we welcome you and we welcome your feedback. And we hope you will stay in the loop with both the Human Empathy Project and From Censored to Celebrated. And let us know if you have any questions in the comment page or just connect with us on our websites. Gena, is there any other great way that folks can get in touch with you other than Google Plus and Facebook?
Google Plus has all the different links of ways to reach me, and I would be really happy to stay in touch with people and exchange resources and help foster those connections. So thanks for having me, Melita.
Yes, all right. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Gena. And until we meet again, hopefully on the celebration tour, I'll be able to do some really fun on-the-spot interviews with librarians and as I gift books. And of course, I'll be taking pictures and get on my email list if you want the insider scoop of what is going on behind the scenes. So until we meet again, please celebrate all the people in your life. Bye, everybody. And we'll stop the broadcast.